In 1953, a sharecropper's wife in Sunflower County, Mississippi, fed 9 people supper every night on less than $1. She had a cast iron skillet, a sack of cornmeal, and whatever the garden and the hog gave her. Number 17 on this list took her 12 hours to prepare. Number 24 cost nothing because the ingredients were already on the counter. Number 3 was the dinner her children begged for on payday because it meant 30 cents to spare. Now, I am not a doctor, and I am not telling you to change how you eat. This is just looking at how things used to be. These 25 dinners kept black families alive during the hardest years of Jim Crow. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man dinners black families actually ate in the 1950s. Number 25, scrambled eggs stretched with bread. In a kitchen where 6 children needed supper and the icebox held 4 eggs, a mother in Greenville, South Carolina, tore day-old bread into small pieces, soaked them in a splash of milk, then scrambled everything together with the eggs and bacon grease until the bread disappeared into the curds. The plate looked full. The children did not know half of what they were eating was bread. A loaf cost 14 cents in 1952. Eggs was 60 cents a dozen, 5 cents per egg stretched across 6 plates with 10 cents worth of bread. That was the math. That was every night. Mothers across the South did not have cookbooks for this. They had instinct sharpened by decades of making something look like enough when it was not. A child went to bed thinking they had eaten eggs. The mother knew the truth, but the child was full, and that was the only arithmetic that mattered. Number 24, buttermilk and cornbread. A bowl, a piece of cold cornbread left from yesterday, a glass of buttermilk poured over the top. You crumbled the cornbread into the buttermilk with your fingers the way your grandmother did and her grandmother before that, and ate it with a spoon. The cornbread softened in the tangy liquid and became something between cereal and bread pudding. Cold, sharp filling. No stove required, no heat, no effort beyond lifting a spoon. Generation after generation, the same bowl, the same spoon. Buttermilk cost 20 cents a quart in the 1950s. Cornbread was already on the counter because cornbread was always on the counter. In black households, from the Delta to the Piedmont, this was not a recipe anyone invented. It evolved across generations, passed from hand to hand. When a grandmother in Alabama crumbled cornbread into buttermilk, she was doing what her mother did in the same kitchen with the same bowl. The meal was not about flavor, it was about continuity. Number 23, rice and gravy. In the low country of South Carolina and the Creole kitchens of Louisiana, rice was not a side dish, it was the foundation. Leftover rice went back into the pot the next evening with a ladle of brown gravy saved from the night before. Gravy from smothered pork chops. Gravy from stewed chicken necks. Gravy from pan drippings collected in a jar by the stove. You heated it until the rice absorbed every drop and each grain was coated in something rich and dark. In the Gula communities of the Sea Islands, rice and gravy for supper was so traditional that not having it felt wrong. The rice was always there because no one in a Gula kitchen ever cooked less than a full pot. A 5-pound bag of rice cost 49 cents in 1955 and lasted 2 weeks. The gravy was free because it had already been paid for with yesterday's supper. Nothing wasted, nothing thrown away. Number 22, hoe cakes. The name came from field workers who cooked cornmeal batter on the flat blade of a garden hoe held over an open fire. By the 1950s, the hoe was gone, but the name stayed. Cornmeal, water, salt, a spoonful of bacon grease. You dropped the batter into a hot skillet and flattened it thin. 3 minutes per side, crispy outside, dense inside, ready for a potlikker or syrup or just eaten plain with your hands. A batch from 1 cup of cornmeal cost less than 5 cents. In the black farming communities of the Mississippi Delta, hoe cakes were the bread of the table when there was no money for flour. Enslaved people had made them for centuries. Their grandchildren still made them in the 1950s. The recipe had not changed because the recipe could not get any simpler. Cornmeal and water and heat. That was survival's whole recipe on a plate. Number 21, salt pork and gravy. Salt pork was the cheapest cut at the butcher counter. A slab of cured pork belly, mostly fat with a thin ribbon of meat running through. You sliced it thin and fried it in a skillet until the fat rendered and the edges turned crispy. Then you pulled the meat out, sprinkled flour into the drippings, stirred until golden, and poured in milk to make a thick white gravy. That gravy went over rice, over biscuits, over whatever was on the plate. The salt pork itself was almost a garnish. The gravy was the real meal. In 1954, salt pork cost 29 cents a pound. A pound made gravy for a week. Black families in the rural South ate salt pork gravy the way other Americans ate butter. It went on everything. It stretched everything. It turned a plate of plain rice into supper. The taste was salt and smoke and richness. Not meat, not really, but it disguised how little actual meat was involved. Number 20, sweet potato and syrup. Sweet potatoes were the cheapest vegetable in the 1950s South. A bushel cost less than $1 at roadside stands. Families who grew their own paid nothing. You baked them until the skin split and the flesh turned orange and soft, then split one open and poured cane syrup or sorghum molasses over the top. That was supper. A baked sweet potato with syrup cost less than 5 cents and filled a grown man enough to sleep through the night. In rural Alabama and Georgia, children ate this 3 or 4 nights a week during winter. The sweet potato was dessert and dinner in one. Grandmothers who kept a garden had bushels stored in the root cellar, and a jug of Alaga syrup lasted a month. Nobody called it a meal plan. Nobody wrote it down. But sweet potato and syrup kept more black families standing through lean months than almost anything else on this list. Number 19, fried green tomatoes. When the garden produced more tomatoes than a family could eat and frost was coming, mothers picked them green and sliced them thick. Each slice was dredged in cornmeal and fried in bacon grease until crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. The tartness of the green tomato cut through the richness of the grease, and the cornmeal crust shattered when you bit through it. A plate of fried green tomatoes with cornbread cost nothing because the tomatoes came from the yard and the cornmeal was already in the cupboard. Black families across Alabama, Mississippi, and the Carolinas ate this through late summer and early fall. 3 or 4 nights a week during tomato season. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote it down. The garden's tomatoes were not ripe, supper needed to happen, and the skillet was already hot. That was the whole decision. Number 18, crackling bread. When a hog was slaughtered in the fall, the skin was cut into pieces and rendered in a wash pot until the fat melted and the skin turned into crunchy golden bits called cracklings. Those cracklings went straight into cornbread batter. The result was bread that crackled when you bit into it, rich with pork flavor and studded with crispy pieces that gave every slice a different texture. A pan of crackling bread sat on the counter for 3 days and still tasted good. In rural Georgia and the Carolinas, crackling bread with a glass of buttermilk was a complete supper. The cost was nothing because the cracklings were a byproduct of making lard, which was itself a byproduct of the hog killing. The hog gave meat for the smokehouse, fat for the lard bucket, and cracklings for the bread. Harper Lee wrote about crackling bread in her novel's pages. Black families in the Deep South did not write about it, they just ate it. Here's where things get honest. The meals on this list were not cooked by people who had choices. They were cooked by women standing in kitchens after 10 hours of working in someone else's kitchen. Women who fed white families during the day and came home to feed their own on whatever was left in the cupboard. A woman standing at a stove at 8 at night, frying cornbread in silence, setting a plate for children who did not know that dinner had already been uncertain twice that week. These meals solved more than hunger. They solved the problem of dignity. When a plate looked full and the food was hot and the table was set, a family could sit down and feel like the day had not beaten them. A full plate in a Jim Crow kitchen was an act of defiance. These women were not following recipes. They were holding families together with cornmeal and cast iron. Number 17, chitlins. The preparation took all day. You cleaned the pig intestines by hand, turning them inside out, scraping them, rinsing 7 or 8 times until the water ran clear. The smell was so strong that neighbors knew what you were making from 2 houses away. Then you boiled them for 4 or 5 hours with onions and vinegar until they turned tender. A 10-pound bucket of chitlins cost about $1 in the 1950s and fed a family of 8 for 2 days. The tradition went back to slavery, when enslaved people received the parts of the hog that white families did not want. The intestines, the feet, the tail, the snout. They turned scraps into meals through patience and skill that no cookbook could teach. By the 1950s, chitlins were served at holiday gatherings and church suppers across the South, a celebration dish born from scarcity's grip. That transformation is the whole story of soul food. Number 16, hot water cornbread. Here's how simple food gets. Cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt. That was it. You poured boiling water over cornmeal and stirred until it formed a thick dough, then shaped it into patties with your hands and dropped them into hot grease. They fried until golden and crispy on the outside, soft and dense on the inside. The boiling water was the whole secret. It cooked the cornmeal before it hit the skillet, making the dough hold together without eggs or milk or flour. Enslaved people made hot water cornbread because they were only given cornmeal and had to find a way. Their grandchildren still made it in the 1950s for the same reason. It was cheap, it was filling, and it required nothing a poor family did not already have. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost 29 cents and made hot water cornbread for 2 weeks. That bag was the most important item in a black Southern pantry. Number 15, stewed tomatoes and rice. A can of stewed tomatoes poured over leftover rice, a pinch of sugar to cut the acid, salt. That was supper on nights when the pantry shelves held canned goods and last night's rice and nothing else. You heated the tomatoes until they broke down, spooned them over rice, and ate with cornbread on the side. A can of tomatoes cost 10 cents in 1953. The rice was already cooked, less than 15 cents per person. The soft rice absorbed the tomato liquid until each grain turned red. In black households across the Low Country, this was so common that families did not consider it a recipe, just what you ate. The chain goes back to grandmother's kitchen, where a can of tomatoes was a luxury. Too simple, too cheap, too personal to put on any menu. Number 14, fried corn. Have you ever tasted corn cut straight off the cob into a hot skillet? Not canned corn, not corn on the cob. Corn cut fresh off the cob with a sharp knife, then scraped with the back of the blade to get the milk out. That corn milk was the whole trick. You put it all into a hot skillet with bacon grease and cooked it down until the corn turned creamy and slightly caramelized almost like a thick pudding. Salt and pepper, that was it. In the 1950s, families who kept a garden had corn every night during August and September. The corn was free. The bacon grease was saved in a can by the stove. The whole dish cost nothing and tasted like summer concentrating itself into one skillet. Black families in the Carolinas and Virginia called it fried corn even though it was closer to a stew. The name did not matter. What mattered was that a mother could walk to the garden's edge, pull 6 ears, and have supper on the table in 20 minutes. Here is something the food industry understood about black families in the 1950s and never said out loud. The foods that kept these families alive had the lowest profit margins in the grocery store. Cornmeal, dried beans, rice, fatback, sweet potatoes, canned tomatoes. You cannot build a brand around a bag of cornmeal. You cannot run a television commercial for fatback. There is no jingle for Potlikker. So the industry replaced these foods with processed alternatives that cost more and delivered less. Each replacement was marketed as progress, but the processed version cost 3 times as much and left the person hungrier 2 hours later. The women who cooked these dinners were not old-fashioned. They were efficient. They fed families of 8 on less than $1 a day with ingredients nobody could put a logo on. The market punished that efficiency because there was no profit in a bag of dried beans. Number 13, liver and onions. Before cholesterol became a word ordinary people knew, liver and onions was a weeknight supper across the South. You sliced beef liver thin, dredged it in seasoned flour, and fried it with onions until the liver was just cooked through and the onions turned sweet and dark. A pound of beef liver cost 35 cents in 1955, cheaper than almost every other cut at the butcher. Doctors recommended liver for anemia, which disproportionately affected black women and children who had limited access to health care. The taste was strong, almost metallic. Children either ate it without complaint or they did not eat at all. No middle ground, no alternative. But the iron content was extraordinary. A single serving delivered more than a full day's requirement. Nobody prescribed it. Nobody called it a supplement. Grandmothers just knew that liver twice a week kept a family on its feet. Number 12, black-eyed peas and ham hock. According to food historians, black-eyed peas were not just for New Year's luck. They were a Wednesday night lifeline. A bag of dried black-eyed peas simmered with a ham hock, an onion, and a can of diced tomatoes until everything melted into a thick, smoky stew. The ham hock was the cheapest cut at the butcher counter, often less than 15 cents a pound in the early 1950s. It existed for one purpose, to give flavor to beans, and it did that job better than anything else in the store. A single pot fed a family of 6 for 2 days. Served over rice, it stretched even further. Black families in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia bought enough dried peas and ham hocks on the first of the month to last until the next check came. This was not cuisine, this was engineering. Number 11, smothered cabbage. 1 head of cabbage. Here is what that became. A piece of smoked meat, salt, pepper, a little vinegar. You quartered the cabbage, layered it in a pot with the smoked meat, added a cup of water, covered it, and let it cook low and slow until the cabbage turned silky and sweet and the smoke from the meat perfumed the whole pot. A head of cabbage cost 10 cents in the 1950s and fed a family of 4. The smoked meat was whatever you had. A ham hock, a piece of smoke's neck, a strip of fatback. The cabbage did the rest. It shrank down to almost nothing in volume, but concentrated every flavor in the pot. In the kitchens of Birmingham and Memphis and Jackson, smothered cabbage appeared at least once a week. It was the supper that said, "We are between paydays and the garden is done, but we are still going to eat." Number 10, Fried fatback with grits. Fatback was the poor family's bacon, a slab of pure pork fat from the back of the hog with no lean streak running through it. You sliced it thin and fried it until the edges curled and turned golden. The rendered fat stayed in the skillet for the grits, which you stirred in until they turned rich and glossy. Nobody chose fatback because they preferred it. The budget chose for them. Bacon cost 53 cents a pound in 1955. Fatback cost 19 cents. For a family of 7, that difference decided whether children ate or did not. Butchers kept fatback behind the counter because it did not sell itself. You had to ask for it, and asking meant everyone in line knew your situation. A mother buying fatback was telling the store a story she never wanted told, but she bought it because her children needed supper. Number 9, tomato sandwiches. 2 slices of white bread, a thick slab of garden tomato, salt. That was supper in August. The tomato had to be homegrown because a store-bought tomato did not have the juice or the flavor to carry a meal. You sliced it thick enough that it bulged past the edges of the bread and salted it heavily so the juices soaked through and turned the bread soft on the inside while the crust held everything together. A loaf of bread cost 14 cents. The tomato came from the backyard. Total cost, almost nothing. In black neighborhoods, from the Carolinas to Texas, tomato sandwiches were the supper that nobody talked about because there was nothing to say. You ate it because the garden was producing and the budget was not. Children did not complain because they understood without being told that this was what the household could manage. The tomato sandwich was honesty on a plate. Number 8, oxtail soup. The butcher sold oxtails for almost nothing because white customers did not want them. A pound cost 15 to 20 cents in the early 1950s. Black families knew what to do with them. You browned the oxtails in a heavy pot, added water, onions, carrots, potatoes, and whatever the garden provided, then simmered for 3 to 4 hours until the meat fell off the bone and the broth turned rich with collagen. The gelatin from the bones made the soup thick without flour or cream. When it cooled, it set like jelly. That was how you knew it was good. A single pot fed a family for 3 days. The bones gave up every trace of flavor they had. Nothing was left behind. In black communities across the South, oxtail was not a cheap cut. It was a butcher's mistake and a grandmother's treasure. Here's what nobody says about these dinners. They were not just about money. They were about time. A black woman in the 1950s who worked as a domestic cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner for someone else's family. Then she came home and cooked again. The meals on this list had to be possible after a 12-hour day on someone else's feet. They had to be made tired. They had to be made in a kitchen that was too hot in summer and too cold in winter, with children underfoot and a husband who might or might not come home for supper. These women were not leisurely cooks following recipes from a magazine. They were exhausted women who stood at a stove because sitting down felt like giving up. The most important quality of every meal on this list is not that it was cheap, it is that it was possible. That is what kept families fed. Number 7, pig feet stew. Who still makes pig feet today? You could buy them for a nickel a piece in the 1950s because they were considered waste by most butchers. A black grandmother bought 4 of them, dropped them in a pot with onions, garlic, vinegar, and red pepper flakes, and simmered for 3 hours until the cartilage dissolved and the broth turned thick as gravy. The meat was rich and sticky, falling off the bone in soft shreds. You ate it with rice to soak up the broth, and a single pot lasted 3 or 4 days. Pig feet required patience. There was no shortcut. The collagen needed time to break down and turn the liquid into something velvety. In black households across the Deep South, pig feet stew was a Saturday meal because Saturday was the one day a woman had time to let something simmer. The house smelled like garlic and vinegar all afternoon. That smell meant tomorrow was Sunday's church, and tonight the family ate well. Number 6, chicken backs and rice. Chicken backs were the part of the bird that grocery stores could barely give away, mostly bone and skin with small pieces of dark meat clinging to the frame. A pound cost 10 cents in 1955. You simmered the backs in water with an onion and salt until the broth turned golden and the meat loosened from the bone. Then you pulled the backs out, picked the meat off by hand, dropped it back in, added rice, and let everything cook together. The rice absorbed the broth and the small pieces of dark meat distributed through every spoonful. For a family of 6, 2 pounds of chicken backs and a cup of rice made supper for less than a quarter. The children thought they were eating chicken and rice. The mother knew they were eating bones and hope. Every single plate was a performance. That was close enough. Number 5, beans and cornbread, and a bag of dried pinto beans cooked low and slow for 3 hours with a piece of salt pork until the broth turned thick and brown and the beans turned creamy. The cornbread baked in the same cast iron skillet, seasoned by decades of use, golden and crackling, flipped out in one piece and broken into chunks to soak up the bean liquor. For families across the rural South, this was not a meal. It was the meal, the one that defined poverty cooking for 100 years. Pinto beans were the cheapest source of protein in the grocery store. A 2-pound bag cost 19 cents in 1953 and fed a family of 6 for 2 nights. A grandmother who kept dried pintos and cornmeal in the cupboard would never go hungry. There was nothing fancy about it. There was nothing to photograph. There was only a full belly and the knowledge that tomorrow you could do it again. Number 4, salmon patties, and a can of pink salmon, an egg, cracker crumbs, a diced onion. Mash it together, shape it into patties, fry them in a skillet until golden outside and moist inside. In 1955, a can of salmon cost 35 cents and made 6 patties, enough for a family of 4 with leftovers for tomorrow. Salmon patties appeared on Wednesday and Friday nights in black households from Atlanta to Chicago, served with rice and greens. The calcium from the salmon's soft bones was something most families never knew about, but it kept the body's frame strong without a doctor's visit. The dish traveled north with the Great Migration. Families who left Mississippi and Alabama brought the recipe in their memories and the cans in their pantry. A grandmother on the south side of Chicago still made salmon patties the way her mother made them in Tupelo. The skillet was different. The recipe was the same. Number 3, fried bologna. A thick slice of bologna scored around the edges so it would not curl, fried in a skillet until the outside turned brown and crispy. Served on white bread with mustard or between 2 slices with cheese if the budget allowed. Bologna cost 29 cents a pound in the 1950s. A single slice made a full dinner for a child. In black neighborhoods of Memphis, Detroit, and Birmingham, fried bologna was the payday dinner, not because it was a luxury, but because it meant the household had just enough to buy something from the deli counter instead of the pantry shelf. The sizzle of bologna hitting a hot skillet was a child's sound of Friday nights. It meant the week was over and the family had survived it. Mothers fried it, standing at the stove still wearing the uniform from the house where they had been cooking all day for someone else's family. Number 2, cornbread and potlikker. Potlikker was the dark, rich broth left behind after cooking collard greens or turnip greens for hours with a piece of smoked meat. Nobody threw it away. That liquid was loaded with vitamins and minerals that had leached out of the greens during the slow cooking. Your grandmother reheated it, crumbled cornbread into a bowl, and poured the warm broth over the top. The cornbread absorbed the liquid and turned into something like savory bread pudding, eaten with a spoon at the kitchen table, usually in silence. In Black households, potlikker was considered medicinal. Mothers gave it to sick children. Grandmothers drank a cup every evening the way other people drank tea. The vitamins were real. The iron was real. The entire dinner was made from leftovers that most Americans would pour down the drain. A meal built entirely from what others would waste. That was the genius of it. Number 1, neckbones and rice. Pork neckbones were the cheapest cut the butcher sold, less than 15 cents a pound in the 1950s, because nobody with money wanted them. But a Black grandmother knew exactly what those bones held. She seasoned them with salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder, browned them in a heavy pot, added water, and let them simmer for 2.5 hours until the meat slid off the bone with a fork. The broth became thick with collagen, dark and rich, and that broth went over rice. A plate of neck bones, and rice was Sunday's centerpiece in households across the South. Children fought over the bones. Grandmothers let them because watching a child gnaw a neck bone clean meant that child was eating. A pot cost less than 50 cents and fed a family of 6 with enough left for Monday. The cheapest ingredients in the hands of a woman who understood patience and heat and time became something a family gathered around. That is not poverty cooking. That is mastery. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. The beans and cornbread, the neck bones and rice, the salmon patties. Then sit down at the table, not the couch. Set a place, eat it slow, because these dinners were never just about being cheap. They were about keeping a family together at a table in a country that tried to pull that family apart.
Dinner rolls made from scratch using leftover mashed potatoes became the soft, pillowy bread that absorbed gravy and made meals feel complete without buying expensive bakery items. Black mothers discovered that adding mashed potatoes to bread dough created rolls with incredible softness and moisture that stayed fresh for days, perfect for holiday meals where food needed to last. A single potato combined with flour, yeast, and minimal butter produced dozens of rolls that cost pennies compared to store-bought options. The dough was easy to work with, forgiving for inexperienced bakers, and could be shaped into various sizes depending on how many people needed feeding. Children loved pulling apart warm rolls to watch the steam escape, while adults appreciated how the potato rolls stayed soft even when served hours after baking. These rolls represented kitchen wisdom that turned leftovers and scraps into something families actively requested. Black-eyed peas cooked with onions and bacon fat carried both flavor and cultural significance, representing good fortune traditions that connected families to their Southern roots and African heritage. Black mothers prepared black-eyed peas for Thanksgiving as practice for New Year's Day when they'd serve them for luck, creating consistency in holiday cooking that children recognized and anticipated. The peas themselves cost less than beans, making them even more economical, and they cooked faster while still providing complete protein when served alongside cornbread or rice. Bacon fat, saved throughout the year, seasoned the peas with smoky richness, while onions added sweetness and depth that made even simple preparations taste complex. Some families added tomatoes or peppers when available, but the core remained peas, onions, and pork fat, simmered until tender. Children grew up associating black-eyed peas with celebration and family, understanding that these humble legumes carried meaning beyond mere nutrition. Hopping John, served at midnight on New Year's Eve, embodied hope and superstition blended with practical economics, as black-eyed peas, rice, and pork came together in tradition-laden celebrations. The peas were cooked with rice, smoked pork, onions, and peppers until everything melded into one unified dish with layers of texture and deep flavor. This wasn't just food, but ritual, with families believing that eating Hopping John at the year's start ensured prosperity throughout coming months ahead. The tradition likely originated with enslaved Africans who combined West African rice cooking techniques with ingredients available on plantations for survival and celebration. In the 1970s, the dish remained affordable because black-eyed peas and rice were among the cheapest staples available in any store. Families made enormous pots, knowing that leftovers meant extended good luck rather than waste that would bring bad fortune. Hopping John represented cultural continuity, African heritage meeting American survival, creating something uniquely Black American that sustained both bodies and spirits. Chicken backs and rice were one of the most practical winter meals mothers relied on when the prices of better cuts climbed too high to touch. Chicken backs were cheap, sometimes the only poultry a family could afford, but they carried enough meat and flavor to build an entire pot around. Mothers simmered them with onions and seasoning until the bones loosened and the broth turned golden. Then came the rice, poured in generously because rice made everything stretch. Kids would watch the pot grow fuller and fuller as the grains absorbed the broth. The chicken pieces were small, but the flavor was big enough to make the whole meal feel complete. It was warm, filling, and steady, the kind of dish that felt like a blessing when the weather outside refused to let up. Chicken backs and rice were proof that a mother could take almost nothing and turn it into enough. It was winter courage served in a bowl. Fried pork chops smothered in gravy turned inexpensive bone-in chops into Sunday dinner centerpieces that made families feel like they were eating something truly special and celebratory. The chops were seasoned generously with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredged in flour, then fried in hot oil until golden brown and crispy all over. After removing the chops, the same skillet was used to make gravy from the drippings, flour, and milk, creating rich sauce poured over the meat. The chops were returned to the gravy and simmered until tender, with the sauce soaking into the crispy coating beautifully. Served with rice, mashed potatoes, or grits, this became meals that satisfied on multiple levels at once. In the 1970s, bone-in pork chops were affordable protein, especially when purchased in bulk from local butchers who knew their customers personally and offered deals. Children eagerly anticipated smothered pork chops, knowing they meant something special was happening that deserved celebration. Fried cornmeal mush was a meal that stuck to your ribs and your memories. Made from cornmeal, water, and salt, it was poured into a pan, cooled, then fried into golden slabs that crisped on the outside and stayed soft in the middle. It was a Depression-era recipe that refused to die, a cheap staple that carried over into the 1970s because it worked. Kids ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sometimes with syrup, sometimes plain. The sound of it sizzling in a skillet was the soundtrack of 1,000 kitchens. It was food that made do without apology. In a world that measured worth by what you had, fried cornmeal mush was the quiet reminder that even the simplest meal could feel rich. People learned that comfort came from creativity, not cost. Fried chicken livers were the brave man's dinner, rich and strong in taste. They were cheap, sold in bulk, and packed with nutrients that families needed. Dipped in flour, seasoned with salt and pepper, and fried until crisp, they were crunchy outside and tender inside. The smell alone filled a kitchen with the sense of abundance, even when money was scarce. Some ate them with rice, others with bread, and always with pride. They were a reminder that flavor and dignity could be found in the most overlooked places. In small kitchens across the South, they sizzled in hot oil while families talked about their day, each sound of frying echoing like a heartbeat. The taste was bold, earthy, and unmistakably homegrown. Children wrinkled their noses at first, but always came around after the first bite. It was food that made you grateful for what you had and proud of what you could create. Lima beans with ham and tomatoes created summer dishes that combined fresh vegetables with smoked pork in ways that made even vegetable-hating children clean their plates completely. Fresh or frozen lima beans were simmered with ham pieces, tomatoes, onions, and peppers until the beans were creamy and the tomatoes had broken down into sauce coating everything. The acidity from tomatoes balanced the beans' starchiness, while the ham added smokiness and salt that brought all flavors together into cohesive whole. This one-pot meal required minimal supervision once assembled, making it perfect for hot summer days when standing over stoves felt absolutely unbearable. The dish was nutritious and filling, providing protein, fiber, and vitamins all in one bowl served over rice for complete meals. In the 1970s, lima beans were garden staples that families grew themselves or purchased frozen in bulk economically at stores. Lima beans with ham and tomatoes represented seasonal cooking and the satisfaction of eating fresh produce prepared simply but deliciously. Cornbread and potlikker was a winter lifeline, the kind of dish that carried a deeper history than most people realized. Potlikker was the broth left behind after cooking greens, and in many families it was considered just as valuable as the greens themselves. Thick, salty, and full of nutrients, it became a meal all on its own when paired with a slice of fresh cornbread. Mothers would crumble the cornbread into the potlikker or pour the broth directly over the bowl, letting it soak until the edges softened. Kids loved it more than they ever admitted, especially on nights when the cold felt sharp and the house needed something warming. It was simple food, but it tasted like something older, something that came from the days when nothing was wasted because nothing could be. Potlikker filled you up in a way that made your whole body feel steadier. Cornbread gave it something to cling to, turning a thin broth into a full meal. It was winter resilience in a bowl, humble but powerful. No matter how tight groceries got, this dish always came through. Salmon croquettes stretched single cans into crispy patties, feeding 6 people for less than $1, proving that canned goods could become genuinely delicious meals. The salmon was drained, mashed with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and seasonings including black pepper, garlic powder, and hot sauce, then shaped into patties. These were fried in hot oil until golden brown and crispy outside while staying moist inside, providing omega-3 fatty acids and protein when fresh fish was completely unreachable. Mothers made them for dinner alongside macaroni and cheese or greens, creating meals that satisfied both hunger and budget constraints simultaneously. Children often requested these specifically, finding comfort in their familiar taste and satisfying crunch. In the 1970s, canned salmon was an affordable pantry staple that didn't require refrigeration, making it practical for families without reliable power. Salmon croquettes represented smart shopping meeting creative cooking, proving that thrift didn't mean sacrifice, just resourcefulness applied to available ingredients. Cornmeal mush with butter and syrup started countless mornings as hot cereal that cost pennies and filled stomachs before school or work began. Cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling water with salt until it thickened into smooth porridge, requiring constant stirring to prevent lumps from ruining texture. The finished mush was served hot in bowls with butter melting into pools on top and cane syrup or molasses drizzled over for sweetness that made mornings bearable. This provided sustained energy from whole grain cornmeal that kept children focused through morning classes without hunger distracting them. Leftover mush was poured into pans, chilled until solid, then sliced and fried the next morning for completely different textures. In the 1970s, cornmeal bags cost less than $1 and lasted for weeks of breakfasts, making it economically essential for large families. Cornmeal mush represented resourcefulness meeting practicality, showing how basic ingredients could provide real nourishment that sustained entire generations through hardship. Canned sardines with crackers and mustard were the no-cook meal that kept hunger away when the stove stayed cold. It was the supper of night shifts, factory breaks, and long days that never seemed to end. You peeled back the tin, spread the fish on saltines, added a dab of mustard, and called it dinner. It was sharp, salty, and strangely comforting. People who ate this did not care about appearances. They cared about surviving another day. The tang of mustard, the crunch of crackers, the oil of the sardines. It all came together in quiet satisfaction. It was the food of those who refused to quit. In a world that gave them little, they made do with what they had and made it taste like perseverance.
Tell me which one you're going to make in the comments. I want to know if the chitlins get more love than the neckbones. I want to know if anyone remembers the smell of Potlikker at 6 in the evening, because these are not just recipes, they are proof that the simplest food cooked in the smallest kitchen can still be an act of dignity. And there is someone in your family who made one of these dinners on a weeknight when there was almost nothing left in the kitchen, who turned nothing into something without thinking twice about it. That skill did not disappear. It was just never written down. You can still carry it forward.